another motherfucking relay where we're covering today's top boxing
news. Jose Ramirez versus Maurice Hooker for the WBC and WBO 140-pound titles. Let's talk about the fight. You know, this was a fight that I didn't want to pick a pony in the show in all honesty. I felt that either guy has it within his abilities to win this fight, that either guy can hurt either guy, and because Maurice Hooker does have a tendency to give up his height to smaller fighters to trade hooks on the inside, there's just no knowing how he's going to choose to go about fighting this fight. And because of that, it makes it a 50-50 fight. That if Maurice Hooker allows himself to be drawn into a war, it doesn't really favor him. You understand that in the pocket, in the phone booth, Jose Ramirez has the advantage. The fight seemed very much like a 50-50 fight to me, but I decided to go out on a limb. I decided to pick Maurice Hooker to fight a mature fight behind straight punches, shooting the jab from the outside to keep the smaller man out. And for a time in the match, you saw shades of that. You saw Maurice Hooker employing the jab for as long as the fight lasted, though it didn't last very long. But he allowed himself to be drawn out into a war at times in this fight. So let's discuss it. The aesthetic of this fight entertained everybody. There was back and forth action, with Jose Ramirez picking up the first 2 rounds, at least on my card. Jose Ramirez definitely picked up the first 2 rounds. I gave Maurice Hooker the subsequent 2 rounds thereafter, so that gave it a tie score, with Jose Ramirez being up due to the quote-unquote knockdown in the first round. A knockdown that I think should have been ruled a slip, but better still, by the end of the 4th, I had 2 guys picking up 2 rounds apiece. Now the 5th...
swing round.
You know, tough round to score. Could have been a swing round. I mean, that's how I looked at it. It could be a swing round.
For either of them.
Or it could have been. But because the fight was taking place in Maurice Hooker's backyard, and because it was a hard round to score where both guys did some good work, Jose did some good work, Hooker, he did some good work, I figured, you know what, they're in Maurice Hooker's backyard. It's a safe assumption
he might have nicked it,
that the judges will give it to the hometown fighter, so I scored that round
for Mighty Mo
for Maurice Hooker with the understanding that it's a close round, that it is a swing round, but it might be a round that they may have chosen to give Maurice Hooker.
Home field advantage.
But as we all know, in the following round, Jose Ramirez took this fight out of the judges' hands. When Maurice Hooker tried with the jab, he was a little bit too far on the inside when he did it, but he tried with the jab, looked to be setting up a hook, and ended up catching one on the right side of his face. A devastating short left hook from Jose Ramirez that sent Maurice Hooker reeling into the ropes. Ramirez subsequently follows up and unleashes a hellacious combination. Good stoppage from the ref, because it was pretty clear to see Maurice Hooker's not recovering from that. So
this thing needs to be stopped.
And all of this was set in motion by Maurice Hooker getting caught between the punches, between shooting the jab and trying for the hook.
He was too far inside.
He was simply too far on the inside at the time he tried to land that combination, and as a result, Jose Ramirez was able to exploit that, because I cautioned ahead of the fight. Those of you that saw my prediction video will already know I cautioned that, you know, at that range, it really does favor Jose Ramirez, because at that range, he may be able to get off his shots a half second sooner than Maurice. And, you know, that's really what happened from a purely nuts and bolts perspective. One of the same things that makes Maurice Hooker such an entertaining fighter to watch just so happens to be the same thing in this situation that was working against him, that he's got a dog in him. He's not afraid to mix it up in the pocket. He's not afraid to make it a down and dirty and gutting fight. But in this particular situation, it behooved him to rely more on his length and his boxing
more than his aggression,
than his gamesmanship. And that really was the wild card here. That was the open book. How would Maurice Hooker choose to fight this fight? Because he's got the physical dimensions to keep this a boxing match, you understand. He's got the right kind of physical dimensions for the job to maintain distance between himself and the other guy, but given that he has a dog in him, we don't know if he's actually going to do that. You think about the early portion of the fight, those first couple of rounds. You know, Maurice Hooker finds himself laying on the ropes as Jose Ramirez unloads. You know, that's a place against a relentless pressure guy like Jose Ramirez that you just don't want to be. You don't want to be stationary laying on the ropes as this guy gets off his combinations, because there, in that particular area, he's well within a sweet spot and he's got plenty of opportunity to really drive those punches. And Maurice Hooker, you know, he survives the onslaught, at least in that segment of the fight. And, you know, it seemed like he had learned his lesson because, you know, 1 or 2 rounds pass and we see Maurice Hooker, rather than laying on the ropes, pivoting off the ropes.
Away from Jose.
Circling out, trying to maintain that distance. So I reiterate, it was something that Maurice Hooker had the physical dimensions to do, But because he's got a dog in him and because, he's a bit of a hooker himself, you just don't know if he's going to fight the kind of mature fight, the kind of poised and controlled fight, the boxing match that he would have needed to keep control of this thing. Because Jose Ramirez is relentless. You got to realize that.
He's a pressure guy.
This kind of guy, he's not going to stop coming after you. Let's talk about Jose Ramirez. Ahead of the fight in my prediction video, I talked about how I viewed Ramirez as the more durable guy of the two. I felt that Ramirez not only takes the better shot, but gives the bigger shot. And if I was right about anything, I was right about that.
He proved that.
Because in the fight, we saw, for as long as it lasted, that Ramirez was able to weather some really hard hooks from Maurice, you understand. It's not like this thing was one-sided at all. The action was back and forth, and Maurice Hooker landed some really hard shots on Jose Ramirez, and he never stopped pressing forward. He never stopped staying in character and being the pressure guy, the kind of puncher that he is. You think about what kind of a stage this was. Not only is Jose Ramirez fighting in the other guy's backyard, he's fighting in many ways on enemy territory, but he's fighting on the rival platform. It's that much more admirable, his victory over Maurice Hooker. Not just the way that he won the fight, but what he took on before it even came to that you're going to the other guy's backyard, on the other guy's platform.
Risking your pro record.
And you're really risking it all. You're risking your you're risking your title, It's that much more admirable because of what kind of a stage it was.
It's a risky situation.
And that is the power of belief, ladies and gentlemen. That is the power of belief. Not only the power of belief in terms of Ramirez, where he believes in himself enough that he's willing to do it, but his backers believe in him as well, that they're willing to let their guy go in there and do the job because they believe that he can do it. We don't see this kind of willingness across the board. We don't. We just don't. You don't see this kind of belief from every single outfit in the sport of boxing, whereas the people over there at Top Rank, they believed in their guy enough that, okay, we'll let our guy fight on DAZN.
Okay.
We'll let him fight against your champion. We'll let him do it because we believe that he can do it.
So bring it on.
It's that much more admirable. The victory is that much more sweet as a result. It's an interesting turn of events because, if you backtrack a couple of months, back when the talk of the town was Jose Ramirez versus Regis Prograis. Regis and his team, and Jose Ramirez and his team, both sides actually chose to forego what was supposed to be a mandated title defense between those guys. They chose to forego that amicably. They said that they wanted both guys to have the opportunity to build their names so that somewhere down the line, when they do fight, it'll be a bigger fight as a result. You think about the subsequent months thereafter, and it seemed like Regis Prograis was on his way to doing that, participating in the World Boxing Super Series and looking the way that he was looking, winning. Now he's in the, he went from the quarterfinal to the semifinal to the final. He's going to be squaring off against Josh Taylor. You think about that.
He was building his name.
Regis did get himself a buzz in that time, whereas for the most part, Jose Ramirez was flying under the radar. Received some criticism for it. Some people out there felt like Jose had ducked Regis Prograis. Yeah, there were those people saying that stuff. There were. And, while Jose Ramirez is flying under the radar, most of the attention
at 140
that the weight was garnering, things that were going on at 140, they were in relation to either Josh Taylor or Regis Prograis. And Jose Ramirez seemed like he was just fading into the background. And he has managed to turn the tide, turn the tables, because this victory over Maurice Hooker, in sensational fashion, I might add, is what everybody's talking about at 140. He is now the unified WBO, WBC champion, whereas if you would have asked people a couple of months ago, they would have thought Regis would have beat him to the punch in terms of unifying titles. Well, that's not the case. Jose Ramirez has set the stage for what could be their fight, and now it's up to Regis to come through. It's up to him to become a unified champion himself, and whether or not he can do that is an entirely different conversation. That's a subject for another day. But Jose Ramirez very much has set the stage, and I think gotten himself a lot of fans. Because, you couldn't ask for a more fan-friendly fight. You couldn't have asked for a bigger crowd pleaser. The best versus the best. Undefeated champion versus undefeated champion. No fuss, no muss. Both guys want it, and both sides are willing to do it. And in that kind of a situation where so much is on the line, Jose Ramirez has emerged the victor. And, it just don't get no better than that. Both of these guys showed their worth, showed their quality, both Jose and Maurice, in victory and defeat. The gracious former champion congratulating
the victor,
the new unified guy at the weight. For Maurice Hooker, yes, he came up short last night, but he's got nothing to be ashamed of, and this is only his first professional loss, so this isn't the end of the road for him by any stretch of the imagination, given how he's come along as a fighter, the championship qualities he's already exhibited, and quite honestly, the fact that he's got such a fan-friendly style, he can still be in the mix of all the sizzling conversations at or around 140 pounds. So, just congratulations to both guys for putting on a sensational performance on both counts, going in there and leaving it all in the ring. Fantastic fight. And, there were two other champions in action last night. Two of the bigger names in the 130-pound division. They were in action, though not against each other, the way that Jose and Maurice were, but better still, both Tevin Farmer and Gervonta Davis were defending their titles last night, and both of them were satisfying their mandatory challenges. Gervonta Davis with his mandatory Ricardo Nuñez, and Tevin Farmer with his mandatory Guillaume Frenois. And, just ahead of both of those fights, the safe assumption is that, Gervonta Davis is going to make short work of the Nuñez guy, and Tevin Farmer is likely going to box the socks off of Frenois, and that's very much what happened. It's everything you expected upon, hearing about those fights, so there were no surprises. But as usual, whenever one guy's brought up, so is the other. Gervonta Davis subsequently called out Tevin Farmer post-fight after dispatching Nuñez after I think it was 2 rounds. To be honest, I didn't watch his fight. I just wasn't interested. That's just the truth. I don't know if you guys did, but I didn't. I was actually watching the DAZN card. Better still, the news is Gervonta Davis called out Tevin Farmer, and you wonder how genuine these kinds of call-outs are. I mean, you really... you hear them and you react to them, but how much stock do you actually have with the people over there at the PBC getting a unification fight made with a guy who's on another platform?
None.
Needless to say, that's not their strong suit. That's not what they're known for. So in spite of Gervonta Davis calling Tevin Farmer out post-fight, I'm not buying it. That's one of those situations where I'm going to have to see it to believe it, because I'm of the opinion the guy we're more likely to see Gervonta Davis fight next ain't Tevin fucking Farmer. For Christ's sake, Tevin Farmer's people have already made offers to Gervonta Davis that he rejected long ago. So the guy he's more likely to be fighting next, it's not Tevin Farmer, it's Yuriorkis Gamboa. It's not a coincidence that Gamboa was on his undercard fighting against, Roman Martinez. That's not a coincidence, it really isn't. They've been talking about matching those two guys together against each other, bringing Yuriorkis Gamboa down to 130. They've been talking about matching those two guys against each other as far back as April. Gamboa's name was one of the names in the hat for what was to be Gervonta Davis's next opponent option. But Gervonta Davis, he's got a mandatory, so they chose to go that route, get that out of the way to free up his schedule.
Not much choice.
But in all likelihood, that's the next guy we're going to see Gervonta Davis fighting, not Tevin Farmer. I am not holding my breath to see the PBC extend any olive branches to any of the other outfits that are out there. In all likelihood, that call-out was a lot of showmanship to rile up the crowd and get everybody excited, but I have no stock in what they say so much as what they do. And I'm in all honesty,
I'm not buying it.
It'd be great if the people over there at the PBC changed their business practices and proved me wrong and did what they had to do to make a fight between Gervonta and Tevin. But
I don't believe it.
Honestly, I'm not holding my breath to see that. I'm just not. They are very much determined to operate as an island.
Cut off from everybody.
So if Tevin Farmer is gonna, if he's gonna be in a unification fight anywhere inside of 2 to 3 fights or something like that, I sincerely doubt it'll be against Gervonta Davis, and in all likelihood, it may be against either Miguel Berchelt or Jamel Herring. Either one of the guys, either one of the champions on the top-ranked side of the street, because it just so happens that, Bob Arum, he had this to say.
We get deals done very quickly. We're very competitive against each other, and it's great for boxing. I mean, you saw it tonight. If promoters wouldn't work together, we wouldn't have got tonight.
So are we going to get Tevin and Jojo?
Well, they're both. Jojo's not with either of us. So that's going to be a problem.
No, if they want a unification, maybe Floyd doesn't give him Davis. But I got 2 130-pound champions, and I'm happy to sit down and make.
Berchelt's a great fight.
That being said, I don't think we need to wonder as to whether or not Bob Arum means business when he says that. I don't think we need to question as to whether or not this is something that he would actually do. We don't need to question if this is just talk. We know he means business because last night's fight is a prime example.
That he'll do it.
And the bottom line here is I've got more stock in Bob Arum matching one of his 2 champions at 130 against Tevin Farmer than I have of Al Heyman matching his 1 champion at 130 against Tevin Farmer. Because when it comes to Al Heyman and what he's willing to allow, he is so determined to cut off Gervonta Davis from the rest of the boxing world that he is either bringing up what he's got at 126 or bringing down what he's got at 135. In all likelihood, the next guy you could see Gervonta Davis fighting
Is either
Gamboa, who they would thereby bring down from 135 down to 130. You know, for those of you that aren't aware, Gamboa's fight yesterday with Roman Martinez, that fight was fought above the 130-pound limit. But better still, they'd bring him down for Gervonta, oh yeah. So they would either bring down Gamboa from 135 down to 130 or bring up Leo Santa Cruz from 126 to 130. It's not a coincidence that these are all names that were tied to Gervonta Davis as potential opponent options for the near future. It's not a coincidence. And these names, these are the indicators of how determined Al Heyman and the people over there at the PBC are to cut Gervonta Davis off from the rest of the boxing world and the entire 130-pound division as a whole. I'd sooner expect to see Gervonta Davis swapping punches with one of them than Tevin Farmer. I've got no stock in that. I'm not holding my breath. And Gervonta Davis calling him out post-fight reads to me as little more than showmanship. There are no real intentions behind that, because if they were really motivated in matching Gervonta Davis against the best fighters in the 130-pound division, the best fighters the division has to offer, that would require them to extend an olive branch to one of the other outfits in town, and the PBC, quite honestly, is not known for doing that. They will either choose to fight Leo Santa Cruz because of what Mexican-American fans he can bring to the table, or they will match him against Yuriorkis Gamboa, because you know what? At this age, you know, if Gamboa were to come down to 130, at this age, having to cut those extra 2-3 pounds, it would be physically taxing for Yuriorkis Gamboa, and that would afford Gervonta Davis the opportunity to add yet another knockout to the highlight reel, which I have no doubts is the logic behind a lot of their opponent choices for Gervonta Davis. You know, their focus with Gervonta Davis, the opponent options that they put him in there with, these aren't the kind of opponents you match a guy with when you want him to get better, when you want to put him in situations that would require him to be a better fighter. What they really want to do with this kid is build his brand, market him to you. They don't actually want him to become a better fighter so much as appear as a better fighter. And it's for this reason that, I don't think for a second they're going to match this guy against the best and brightest guys at 130. I don't. So in all honesty, I'm not holding my breath for that. I'd sooner expect to see Tevin Farmer versus Miguel Berchelt than Tevin Farmer versus Gervonta Davis.